Hello, it's Rachel, and welcome back to your long game plan for losing your cool less. So, welcome to part 1B, where we're going to talk about what to do instead. Because in part 1A, we talked about what you've tried and why it's not working. So, now we're going to start to delve into what you can do and what's going to make a difference in the long run, which is, of course, our goal. So, as a reminder, we talked about in the first part what you need to know to lose your cool less. And we talked about the fact that losing your cool is simply a sign that your yuck is bigger than your coping skills. And we also talked about the fact that if you want to stay more calm and lose your cool less, we need to address your yuck and increase your coping skills. And that it's much easier to do this, to address your yuck and increase your coping skills proactively than in the moment. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that now. But first, I want to introduce a concept to you of your story. And what you need to know is that your story affects your ability to stay calm. If you want to lose your cool less, you really need to be familiar with what I mean by your story. So basically, our story is what we tell ourselves about a situation. It's our interpretation of whatever's going on around us. Because very honestly, we can have 5 people in the same exact situation, and they may all have a very different interpretation or a very different story. So it's really important to understand that what we tell ourselves about a situation completely determines whether we stay calm or lose our cool. So our story can make someone's behavior a threat. And if you recall, from the last training, we talked about the fact that when our brain senses a threat, that's when we go into yuck. So I'm going to go through this with an example of that we talked about a little bit last time, where a dad loses his cool when his daughter complains about homework. Now, I started to imply this a little bit in the last section, but I didn't want to go too deep into it. We're going to go a little bit deeper this time. Why he loses his cool when his daughter complains about his homework. So, first of all, we have to think about our biological needs. So, if this father loses his cool when he is or if he's dealing with this situation when he's hungry, or he's tired, or maybe he's had a really long day and he doesn't have very much energy, that is going to affect how he sees the situation. If he's tired, if he's hungry, he's going to probably say something to himself like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. I wish she would just do her homework. So when he says, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this, or when his brain notices that he's tired and hungry, his brain is going to sense that threat, and he is going to go into yuck. And remember, he may turn his yuck out. Very likely, he may turn it in, or maybe he can hold it together, but then he's going to numb his yuck later. But also, remember, our story makes their behavior a threat. And our story could also include our emotional needs. So this dad could say something to himself like, and his story could be something like, I can't believe she's complaining about homework. I've told her time and time again, I'm tired of hearing about her complaints, and she's not listening to me. So what he's basically saying with that story is, she's treating me like I don't matter. I've told her what I want, and she's not listening to me. That's going to create a threat because we need to feel like we matter. And when our kids aren't listening to us, we are going to go into yuck. Or maybe this dad's story is something like, oh my gosh, she's complaining about her homework. I've tried to get her to stop. I can't get her to stop. I don't know how to handle this. That is going to create a threat in his brain because his brain is going to realize, oh my gosh, I feel out of control. I don't know how to handle this. That will put him into yuck based on those emotional needs that I mentioned in the last part of the training. It could also be that our story makes us worry about the future. So this dad could think something like, oh my gosh, if she doesn't do her homework, if she can't stop complaining about her homework, she's never going to be able to complete it, and she's not going to do well in school, and she's going to become lazy, and then she's going to, not get the classes she wants. That's where he's worrying about the future. His story tells his brain that something bad could happen, and that is going to be a threat. So ultimately, what we tell ourselves about the situation tells our brain whether we're safe or not. And what often happens is that what we're telling ourselves leads to what I call a cycle of yuck. So basically, we see their behavior as bad. So, this dad sees his daughter complaining about homework, and he's saying that behavior is not good behavior for all the reasons I just mentioned, all the stories he could have had. And so because he tells himself that the behavior is bad, that puts him into yuck. And when he's in yuck, he's going to respond negatively. So he's probably going to get upset with his daughter because he either worries that she's not listening to him or he doesn't know how to handle it or all of the above. So he may say something like, "Oh my gosh, can you please do your homework without complaining?" And his response is going to put his daughter into yuck. She's not going to like hearing that, especially with a tone like that. And so her yuck behavior may be that she complains more. And because she complains more, he's going to go more into yuck. And this is a cycle of yuck that I see in families happen over and over and over. Is we interpret their behavior as bad. It puts us into yuck. Our response puts them into yuck. Their response puts us into yuck. And it goes over and over. So ultimately, we need to be aware of our story. Now, I will tell you that you have 100% control over your story. And in step 2 of this training, I'm going to teach you how to find a story that works for you instead of against you. I'm going to give you the strategies to use. But what I want you to know now is that when we think about our stories, we don't have to completely change what we're telling ourselves, but what we do want to do is create what I call useful stories. And what I mean by the word useful is that if our story gets us the end result we want, then it's useful. So if this dad thinks something like, my daughter is complaining and I'm tired of it and I don't know how to get it to stop, that's not probably going to get him the outcome he wants. That's going to create a cycle of yuck. But if he thinks something like, you know what, my daughter's complaining about her homework and I can figure out what she's complaining about and I can help her through this and I have this under control, that story is more likely to get him a useful outcome. So again, we're going to get deeper into this as you walk through the steps in your long game plan, but I want you to know that what you want to learn to do is create more useful stories, because then you are going to get so much more useful outcomes. Your brain is not going to sense that threat. You will be able to stay calm and lose your cool less. Now, here's what I want you to know though. It's very hard to change your story in the moment. So if dad is trying to change his story from, my daughter's not doing her homework, she's complaining, this is a bad thing, to, I've got this under control. In the moment, once he's in fight or flight, if you recall, I mentioned that our fight or flight response looks for all the evidence that we are right. So his fight or flight response is going to prevent him from changing his story. So if he starts to think, okay, I've got this under control, it's okay. What's going to happen if he's in fight or flight is his brain's going to say, no, it's not okay. She needs to learn how to do her homework without complaining. And in fight or flight, we only see the confirming evidence. That's why it's really important to try to do this when you're not in fight or flight. Your fight or flight response will look for all of the evidence that it's this horrible thing and that there's a true threat, and you're really not going to be able to change the story in the moment. So when we do get to your long game plan in step 2, you're going to see that most of the strategies I teach you will actually be more proactive. And then in the moment, it's going to be so much easier to stay calm and to not lose your cool. So the last thing I want to tell you in this part of the training is that I'm going to give you this 5-step strategy, your long game plan. And what I want you to know about why I call it your long game plan is because this plan that I give you is going to help you see results that last. Instead of Band-Aid parenting, you're going to use long game parenting. Now, if you recall from the very beginning of the training, I mentioned that Band-Aid parenting are little fixes that we put on that don't really solve the true issue. We get short-term results that don't last when we use Band-Aid parenting. So these are the strategies we've tried. These are the things where we try to calm ourselves down or we make ourselves feel bad. Things like taking deep breaths or seeing each day as a new opportunity, promising yourself you'll do better, or trying to set boundaries or feeling guilty. These are all Band-Aid parenting strategies. They don't work because they don't address what's really going on under the behavior. They don't address why you're really losing your cool. They don't address the yuck, and they don't address your coping skills. So again, Band-Aid parenting doesn't address the reason for our behavior. It doesn't address our yuck. And in what really happens actually is Band-Aid parenting strategies, all of these strategies tend to increase our yuck, not reduce it, because they don't work. So our yuck increases. And these strategies do not focus on coping skills. So what happens is your yuck continues to be bigger than your coping skills because it's not it's not addressing your yuck, so that yuck isn't going down and your coping skills aren't going up, so we lose our cool. What I'm about to teach you are long game parenting strategies. This will lead to long-term results that last because I'm going to help you address your yuck and I'm going to do it proactively. Yes, you will learn in the moment strategies, but I'm going to give you proactive strategies that are so much easier than trying to change your story in the moment. And I'm also going to teach you some skills. I'm going to teach you how to cope more effectively in the plan. So what happens when you address your yuck and learn these skills is your yuck is less than your coping skills, and you will not lose your cool as much. And you're going to learn these long game strategies in part 2. So the last thing I want you to do before you jump into making your plan is do activity 1B, where you're actually going to understand what your story is, why you keep losing your cool, and you're also going to understand your current parenting style. Are you doing more Band-Aid parenting? Are you doing more long game parenting? You're going to see where you are right now so we can actually help you get the results you want and those results that actually stick. So go ahead and fill out activity 1B, and then I'll see you again in part 2 of the training where we will create your long game plan.